Welcome to Red Ice Creations Radio. This is Internet Talk Radio, recorded from the west coast of Sweden, and we have a new program available every Thursday and Sunday through our website, redicecreations.com. My name is Henrik Palmgren, and I am your host. If you are a regular listener or a newcomer to the program, welcome and thank you for tuning in to this Thursday edition of our program. And I'm very glad you are here today because you're in for a real treat. We have Peter Levenda with us on the line, and he is the author of Unholy Alliance and also the 3-volume set Sinister Forces. And it's going to be fascinating to spend some time today talking with Peter about his work and his research for Sinister Forces, and also maybe dive into deeper into the subjects of the occult and the hidden and the connection to politics. And the website that you need to take a look at right away is simply sinisterforces.info, where you can find out more about the book series and also about Peter's blog, and you have some links to the forum up there and so forth. So take a look at sinisterforces.info. And with that, just let me bring Peter Levenda on the show. It's great to have you here. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great. There are so many things I'd like to talk to you about here today, but I thought we could kind of begin on this note for people who might not, be aware of your books and so forth. The series Sinister Forces have a subtitle called A Grimoire of American Political Witchcraft, which, of course, is a raise your eyebrows, to say the least. But first off, for people that might not know about this, what is a grimoire, and what is the connection to American politics there?
Well, a grimoire is a medieval name given to a magician's workbook or book of spells, spirits or demons. It will also have a list of those personalities, angelic or demonic. So a grimoire covers, really, it's an instruction manual for contacting the other world.
Ah, all right.
So the connection to American politics is, for me, there is an underlying force, I believe, in history, which I'm calling the Sinister Forces. And these conspire sometimes to create events that would appear on the outset to be the result of conspiracies or some other kind of human interference, but which may actually reflect deeper underlying causes. So my book is intended to be both a guide to these forces and also to describe how these forces have been tapped by others in the past, especially in reference to American history and some of the things we're experiencing in the world today.
Very interesting. This is a huge book series, of course. Do you kind of view this as your, I guess, life's work? You must have been working on this for a very long time, right?
Yes, I began working on this back during the Watergate era, so that was back in 1975, roughly, when I became aware that some of the individuals who were making news during the Watergate investigation of President Nixon had also been involved in the Bay of Pigs invasion during the Kennedy administration and were suspected of being involved in the Kennedy assassination. When I saw the same individuals showing up, I began to ask myself, is this the result of direct conspiracy, or is there perhaps some other force at work? And this is what set me on this path of trying to understand both conspiracy and coincidence, and trying to find out, is there a connection between the two, or are these two parallel tracks?
Charles Manson, a fascinating character, seems to be a huge part of American culture or subculture. You I guess go into quite a lot talking about Manson. What kind of is your connection to this man?
Charles Manson represents for me the icon, if you will, of all of these forces and how they come together. I became fascinated with Charles Manson for a number of reasons. In the first place, he did not directly participate in any of the murders that bear his name. He was the inspiration for them. He was the ringleader, if you will, the commander who sent out his family to commit these crimes. But yet he himself did not participate. And I began to ask myself a lot of questions. Charles Manson is a rather unattractive individual in so many ways. Illiterate, spent most of his time in prison, and yet he did study the paranormal and the occult while in prison. He had studied Scientology, for instance, and claimed to be a Scientology clear, which basically puts him in the same neighborhood as Tom Cruise and John Travolta.
Yeah.
Which set me back right there. But then, as well, he had a coterie. He had a collection of young, attractive women around him who would then go and commit all of these horrible crimes. So I began to research his background. Where did he go to prison? Where did he grow up? What were the forces that operated on Charles Manson? And I found, to my surprise, that there were definite connections between what happened to Manson and how Manson was essentially created, and the goals of a long-term CIA mind control operation, which we know today as MK Ultra, but which also had other manifestations since about 1950 until the 1970s. So I began to see to myself that Charles Manson seemed to represent an example, if you will, of the sinister forces that I'm writing about. So there's a thread of Charles Manson's mythology, you might say, and his methodology running through my 3-volume series.
Ah, I see. By the way, I don't know if you know this, but apparently he's up for parole now in 2007 at the age of 73.
He's been up for parole quite frequently over the years. He's never managed to successfully get parole, of course. Having a swastika carved into his forehead and claiming that he's, somehow the spiritual father of the country is one of the reasons why it's difficult for him to get parole. But I don't believe he will ever be paroled. I don't believe Charles Manson wants to be paroled. I believe he's quite happy where he is. He's spent most of his life in prison. He's only spent a few years of his entire life outside of prison or outside of some institution. So he's an institutionalized individual. I don't believe he wants to leave.
This, I guess, could lead us into H.P. Lovecraft also, because there is a connection between these two. Isn't that right?
There is a subtle connection in my mind. When I first began to research Manson, I went to the town where Manson grew up, which is a town called Ashland in Kentucky. And I just wanted to see for myself what kind of environment it was. And I was struck by the fact that coming into Ashland, Kentucky, one of the first things that you see is a series of Indian burial mounds in the center of the town, which forms the town's central park. And I knew nothing of Indian burial mounds at the time, and I looked at these things and I wondered, what did they represent? And so I had to do a lot of research on ancient American prehistory before the arrival of the Europeans and try to find out what these mounds represented. And they were quite often burial mounds, but they were also aligned astronomically. They were ritual mounds at times used for, much in the same way Stonehenge was thought to have been used, and built at around the same time or even earlier. So Lovecraft used to write a great deal about primitive societies living in America before the Europeans came. And even then he wrote about maybe Druidic ceremonies taking place, ancient European pagans visiting the shores of the New World and conducting all sorts of hideous sacrifices, according to Lovecraft. And I began to see there was a kind of connection. I mean, here's Charles Manson growing up in a town whose most predominant feature are these burial mounds. And I began to research those civilizations and to discover that Lovecraft actually, although perhaps not knowing it, was writing about something genuine. There were various strange rituals being performed in America back before the time of Columbus, and there were European visitors to America before the time of Columbus, and there were pagan sites that had been set up. So I felt there was a connection there, that maybe America is itself a kind of haunted house. That Manson is a kind of medium, for those forces.
Wasn't it Manson that claimed that he was a reincarnation of H.P. Lovecraft? Or am I mistaken there?
Well, I don't know. That's a very good question. I believe that Manson Manson was born after Lovecraft's death, I believe, so it is, conceivable.
Okay.
He does seem to represent the forces that Lovecraft wrote about, for sure.
Yeah, sure. I mean, Lovecraft talked, as you say, about the great old ones, and the. I mean, do you think that there could be kind of a evil spirit, that is or has been haunting America in that sense?
Well, I think so. In a sense, I think so. I think America, in the last part of my trilogy, I talk about America as a kind of haunted house. I believe that we meaning the Europeans, came to North and South America with very little regard for the civilizations that existed here before. I mean, most American school children are not taught anything about American prehistory. It's considered either controversial or the field of cranks or crackpot anthropologists or something. But there was a very definite series of civilizations here, and they were as ancient as those of Egypt or Mesopotamia, or Stonehenge as an example. The fact that they didn't use stone for building materials means that most of their monuments have been overlooked or accidentally destroyed or deliberately destroyed. So people did not know that we actually are walking on land that tremendous ancient civilizations had occupied. And we don't know what happened here. And for some reason, we tend to build our prisons and our military installations on those sites that were the most prominent sites of the ancient civilizations. Every time you find a series of Indian burial mounds of any size, for some reason there's a penitentiary, a prison across the street or on top of it, or a military base, or in some cases a nuclear waste facility. And I always think to myself that these represent the most tense human habitations, military bases and prisons. And for some reason we choose to build them on the site of Indian burial mounds. So there is an unconscious realization of this in our filmmakers. For instance, in The Shining, the famous Stephen King novel, the Overlook Hotel is supposedly built on the site of an Indian burial mound.
Yeah.
In the movie Poltergeist, they're building housing tracts on the sites of Indian burial mounds. In the movie Identity that came out a couple of years ago, there are references to Indian burial mounds at the site of that famous motel where all of these murders are taking place. So it seems as though in Hollywood we seem to have this unconscious understanding that there's a connection between these burial mounds and some very strange supernatural phenomenon. And Lovecraft wrote about this in the 1920s by saying that the artists would be the first ones to know what was going on and how these forces were coming into play in our life, in our consciousness.
This is very interesting. I mean, we could go a number of avenues here, but one thing that comes to mind, of course, is regarding I guess what would you think about this being that an artist in that sense can actually more easily, I guess, tap into this, I guess, collective unconscious or whatever you want to call it, or are we talking about individuals who actually know what they're doing in this sense?
Well, I believe that there was a conscious attempt to tap into these forces by our own government back beginning in 1950. And the thesis of my work is that when the U.S. government, both the Central Intelligence Agency but also the American military intelligence agencies, tried to unlock the secrets of the human mind in order to create the perfect assassin, or in order to defend our own people against Manchurian candidates, let's say. What they did was they tapped into those very forces that shamans, mystics, and magicians for thousands of years have tried to tap into as well. So our government in the United States was deliberately attempting to unlock the secrets of the mind,